This is a short questionnaire conducted for a research paper on the effects of childhood neglect, traumatic exposure, and substance abuse. You are not required to respond to any of these questions. However, any answers you do provide will not be removed from the study and will be transcribed at the end of the interview for further analysis. For the purposes of this study, interview questions may be skipped or otherwise asked out of order. If you wish for the original audio recording to be removed at any date, please reach out to me. So we'll just start from the top. I know this is the third time we've done this interview, but at any time in your adolescence, were you exposed to or provided any illicit substances, such as alcohol, marijuana, or nicotine? And if so, who provided them? A friend, family member, or guardian? Do you believe your exposure has negatively impacted your judgment?
So none of these things were provided to me throughout my childhood. But I was exposed to them. My mother was an alcoholic. She did a lot of drinking, and she also had issues with sleep medication and other opioids here and there throughout her life. The way that this has impacted me going into adulthood, I am very sensitive about the way that I drink now. I remember that the first time I got drunk, even though I was with a group of friends who I felt safe with, I had a panic attack because I thought that I was acting like my mother. I have a set of rules to prevent myself from ever becoming like her for when I do drink. Top of the list being if I am upset in any way, shape, or form, I will not drink. Other ways that this has impacted me is my mother being an alcoholic. She had a lot of rage. She would get very upset. She would be very emotionally and sometimes physically abusive. I grew up with the idea that anger was a horrible emotion to experience, and that no one should experience that emotion, and whenever I experienced it, I would shame myself.
Okay. Thank you. We'll move on. So at any time in your childhood, did you or your family ever suffer from food insecurity, either by reducing the size of or skipping meals, such as breakfast, lunch, or dinner?
There was a time for a couple of years, specifically from when I was in the late years of elementary school and going into middle school, where my brother and I were involved in a school lunch program where we would receive 40-cent lunches. During that time as well, my mother would also go to the food bank, and most of the food that we would have at home would be from the food bank.
Okay. How long did this go on for, and were there any changes made within the family to better that situation?
This went on, I want to say, for about 3 years. I know that come the end of that, we were in and out of both food bank and grocery store. I don't know what changes were made in the family around that time to better that situation. I know I was also recovering from a concussion at the time, so a lot of my focus was going to that. Around this time, I actually went through a period of avoiding dinner myself. There was a brief time there where I tried starving myself.
Okay. So, were you and your siblings ever blamed for the costs of food, denied food under any circumstances that you would now consider unreasonable?
To my mother, money was always weird. She could never really have enough of it. I feel like there was a lot of blame thrown around about finances. whether that was directed at my father or directed at my brother and I. As for being denied food, I don't ever recall a place and time where my brother and I were ever denied a meal.
Were you blamed for the costs of food at any point that you can remember?
Not specifically food, but money.
Cost of living, okay. At any time in your childhood, were you subjected to any form of legal separation within the family, either be it through divorce or imprisonment of a parent or guardian, or through school or therapy mandated counseling and rehabilitation? Either of those four.
Can we do one at a time on that?
That's one question.
No, I know, just one of the list at a time.
At any time in your childhood, were you subjected to any form of legal separation in your family?
Yes.
Okay. Was it through divorce, imprisonment?
My mother and father got divorced when I was around 6 years old. During that time, we would be at my dad's every other weekend. We would see him a lot more frequently throughout, considering he would drive up if we ever needed help. There was also a point in my childhood where the police had come over to our house in the middle of the night when my mom had a telescope set up in the backyard and she was yelling at neighbors.
Okay.
The police came, called my father to have us come picked up, and we were taken away from my mother's house for a couple of days because she was drunk.
Were you ever separated through school, mandated counseling, going to rehab?
I wish.
Okay.
I wish they intervened like that, but
just
unfortunately,
so you're
they
aware,
don't care enough.
You don't have to respond in full detail. You're free to answer in yeses and nos, and actually I would kind of prefer you do a yes or a no first. Okay? Moving on. Did your family suffer from any form of domestic abuse, verbal and physical, while you were living within the household?
Yes.
Did these events happen in private, away from you and your siblings, or were they public? Be it within the house, in front of you, or outside on public grounds, in the city, at the shopping mall? You don't have to answer.
No, I'm trying to think of something that I heard that was a really good explanation of this.
It's okay.
There was a lot of stuff that happened at home. A lot of which was emotional, a lot of which was verbal, a lot of which was very, very out of hand. There were instances where it would get physical. As for out in public, I read something once before and they described it as the dog whistle insults. Where if you're out and about with somebody who has been abusive to you and they say something to you out in public that other people may not think of as abuse or think of as an insult, but you see it as an insult because of a conversation or an instance you had with that person earlier that day or earlier that week. Just dog whistle insults.
So
humiliation.
Yes. Okay. Are there any other events in your childhood that were traumatic to you? Death of a family member, pet, friend, or exposure to crime, abuse, or physical harm such as robbery, sexual assault, or assault? You don't have to go into detail. I prefer you
Just yes.
didn't.
Yes.
Yes. All of the above?
I can't say that I had close family members die when I was at a young age, nor can I say that my family was involved in crime. But as for sexual assault within the family and without and outside of the family, I did go through traumatic experiences with that.
Okay. So that concludes the first part. We'll move on to the years of 18 and beyond now. So what life choices have you made now having transitioned out of high school and into the adult world that you believe will impact your life for the better? Relationships, progress towards degrees, financial decisions, property purchases.
The one thing that I could really put above all else when it comes to getting out of a situation like that and continuing on towards your adult life is the quiet yet powerful just Can we start that question over? I know you're gonna have to edit this, so.
Or I'll just pause it and start over. All right. We'll continue on now with the adult questionnaire, 18 and beyond, out of high school, living into your own life. So, what life choices have you made now having transitioned out of high school that you believe will impact your life for the better? These could be relationships you've chosen to keep, friendships, partnerships, degrees and certificates, financial decisions you've made, buying a car, house, etc.
I've made a lot of choices over the last couple of years that have definitely helped me improve my life for the better. And over the last couple of years, I've been able to say that I have been in a good place. When, about a month after my 18th birthday, I was kicked out of my home. And that's something that I know in the moment I could have thought, but I had made the decision to just pack all of my things in my car and leave. Didn't know where I was going to go, but I knew I needed to get out. That choice that I made that night altered my life in such a positive way, because I took accountability for where I was. I knew that I had the power to get out of it. I maintained relationships with people through that time that I later ended because they just were not the right relationships to have or to be in. I've learned a lot about resilience. I've learned a lot about powering through. I woke up every single day wanting to do better for myself, for my partner who I've learned how to set boundaries.
Okay.
And I went through therapy for about 2 years to heal from my childhood trauma, learn how to put those boundaries into place, and I can say I am a much different person than I was a couple of years ago.
Okay, and we'll go with the opposite of that question. What life choices have you made now, going through all of that, do you believe will negatively impact your success? These could be self-destructive decisions such as substance abuse, addiction, or ongoing relationships you have with family members, friends, partners, etc. You don't have to respond to that one because you did sum up the first one, but
growing up in childhood abuse, especially when it's not something you realize until much later in life. I know I'm not the only person who has gone through something like that and has experienced the aftermath of it, but the biggest negative side effect was my lack of boundaries as a person. My lack of will to care for myself, my wanting to put every single person in front of me, even if I was going through something 10 times worse.
Okay. Have you picked up any substances, addictions, engaged in self-harm?
I have engaged in self-harm numerous times. It has been a few years since I have done anything like self-harm, though the thought does cross my mind every now and then. The only thing that prevents me from doing it is because I know the people in my life care about me enough to be upset if I were to do something like that. I picked up an addiction to nicotine. Started with smoking cigarettes, and I just got myself a vape, and it's been something I have been struggling to stop for a while. I will say that one of the reasons why it has been so hard to stop is because when I was going through as much as I was going through between the ages of 18 and 22, I needed something in my life that felt like a consistency.
Okay.
Because there wasn't much in my life that was consistent.
All right. This next one is kind of a yes or no. Do you believe your family helped guide you in the right direction?
I'm sorry, but I can't answer that question as a yes or a no.
So no.
Through my childhood, I thought I was being guided in the right direction. I thought I had support. I thought I had parents who were willing enough to care about where I would go to college, what I would pursue, parents who would want to help. And then it came down to time for me to actually make that next life choice and for me to actually step out into adulthood, and every single thing that I had been told throughout my life, every single dream that I had had, all of the hard work that I had put in, they wouldn't do their part. Specifically my mother, she wouldn't help me as a parent when I needed her to be my parent. Because of that, I missed out on a $64,000 scholarship. I missed out on going to school for art and business. And it's a little bit like I was allowed to dream as big as I fucking wanted to dream, as big as I wanted, and I felt like I could do it. And then in an instant, when that dream was one step away from becoming real, it was just fucking, sorry, it was taken away.
Okay.
Even though I did everything on my side of things and beyond to do my mother's side of things, I couldn't do everything because I wasn't her. Okay. I wasn't a parent. There was a lot I didn't know how to do, and I needed her help, and she wouldn't do it.
Okay. We'll move on. If you were asked in a job interview, do you believe you know the answer to where you would see yourself in 5 years?
Can you ask the question again? I dissociated a little bit.
It's okay. If you were asked in a job interview, do you believe you know the answer to where you would see yourself in 5 years? Describe why or why not, and what leads you to feeling this way.
The last time I was asked that in a job interview.
I'm talking about now. If you were asked where do you see yourself in 5 years, do you believe you'd be able to answer that question?
From a career or business standpoint, no.
Okay.
But
Why
from
do
an
you...
emotional standpoint, I would answer just happy. Because that's a goal I have for myself. I want, and I've been reaching that. And I feel like I have a lot of that now. But from a career or a business standpoint, I feel like there are so many uncertainties in life, and I've had many goals throughout my life. I am finally at a point in time where I get to decide what I want to go do, what I want to pursue, what I want to follow, but I'm not sure what that is yet.
Okay.
So in 5 years, I don't know. I have to get through where I'm at right now.
Okay. Moving on. Are there any critical decisions you regret and wish to change, having, moved past the age of 18, such as addiction, your career goals, friendships, or relationships? Briefly describe them, please.
Regrets.
Yeah. Would you go back and change anything, or do you believe your decisions have helped you?
There are a few chapters of my past that I would love to rewrite. But at the end of the day, I know that the experiences that I went through also built me into the person that I am today. I hate that I had to go through as much as I did, but I'm also grateful because I've learned so much about myself. I've learned a lot about people. I've learned a lot about the world. Would I go back to rewrite some chapters? Maybe. But at the same time, I feel like a lot of my hardships are why I'm here as a person today.
Have you determined at any time beyond high school that you were the victim of childhood neglect within your parents' household?
Yes.
Okay. That one was obvious. Have you determined then at any time beyond high school that you were the victim of an abusive relationship, be it verbally through threats of harm or self-harm, or physically through assault or sexual assault?
Yes.
How have you managed the situation? Have you developed codependencies on illicit substances, engaged in infidelity, or practice the term of non-confrontation?
Non-confrontation.
It's,
When you don't confront something.
yeah, it's when you push the can down the road.
I went through so much all at once. I had so many different things happen to me that I needed to put my attention onto and try to heal from. But things kind of just kept happening. And I was in a very, very vulnerable state of mind for a long time. I lost myself for a while. I have issues with memory because of that time. I can say that I know that I relied on marijuana for a little while just to help me fall asleep at night. As for not wanting to confront certain things, it would kind of go in hand with not being able to remember the details of certain things. And it sucks when you're in a headspace like that because your brain kind of just determines that it's gonna store that memory away for now. And then it just fucking rolls back into your life. And sometimes that can be healing, and sometimes that can be like a grenade about to go off. So.
We'll move on.
Yeah, please.
At any time after reaching the age of 18, were any of your family members or relatives involved in a legal separation, be it through divorce or imprisonment?
Yes.
What happened and why do you think it did? You don't have to answer.
Even after I left my mom's house, my dad and her were still fighting for custody of my younger brother. They were fighting over finances. They were fighting over child support. My father committed a couple of crimes around then too. Had a misdemeanor on his record for sexual harassment against an older woman. And then he went through court because of a felony against a aggravated assault against me. That's the crime part, but I know that the separation part had a lot to do with my younger brother, and I was and I still do try to mitigate that situation as best as I can so he doesn't have to go through what I had to.
Okay. We'll take a break for a little bit and then we'll go on to the final part of the interview and then you'll be good. Okay, now we're on to the third and final part of the interview, only applicable to STEM students. So if you need to take a break or you want to skip over any of these questions, let me know, okay? Prior to the shooting, how did you view the school? Did you think it was a good school? Were there negative aspects, good aspects? How did you view it?
It took me 2 years to convince my mom to take me to STEM. I went to Douglas County in Castle Rock for the first 2 years of high school. When I transferred into STEM, it was a night and day difference. I heard people talk about the school and the way that they would describe it, just that they would describe it just sounded a little bit too good to be true. Because when I got there, there were no cliques. There were no bullies. There were no druggies or burnouts or people who didn't care about their academics. It was a school where you could truly be yourself and be accepted. It was a school that had teachers that cared about your education as much as you did, and who wanted to see you excel. And even with what happened, I still view the school like that.
Okay. Prior to the shooting, were you aware of any illegally distributed illicit substances on the campus? Smoke breaks, marijuana?
All I knew, people would go into the bathroom stalls to vape. I'm sure that there was marijuana throughout up until like a couple months before the shooting. I didn't know that even the group of friends I was in had cocaine and opioids, and they would trade and sell to one another and then get together in the middle of school, after school, to go smoke weed, do cocaine, take drugs, just...
Okay. Prior to the shooting, were you aware of any threats, be it through physical violence or self-harm, made by any of these students? How seriously were these threats taken, if any?
I was the person people would bring their razors to. Outside of bathrooms. Yes. But I was the person that people would bring their razors to. I had a lot of different people that I knew who trusted me, who would steal razor blades that people would use to self-harm. Take them and bring them over to me because they didn't trust themselves with it, or they didn't trust the person that they took it from with it. Self-harm was a pretty big thing among a lot of students at STEM.
Did the school take these threats seriously, was the question.
I don't think the school ever responded to the mental health of these students in the way that they needed to be responded to. I would walk people to the school counselor if they were having mental breakdowns or they just needed someone to talk to that was an adult. I would leave class, walk them up there, make sure that they were okay. But, you know, they never got what they really needed from the school counselor. But it's not just the school counselor's job to help those students through it. They have to take part themselves as well.
Okay. We'll move on. Prior to the shooting, were you engaged in any groups, clubs, or relationships that you believe negatively impacted your judgment, morals at the time? Groups specifically engaging in exclusion, bullying, or manipulation of other individuals?
No,
No?
no.
Okay. Do you believe the school appropriately responded to any threats or concerns relating to self-harm, physical violence, shooting threats, bomb threats, etc.?
I know that the school responded to a couple of students on suicidal thoughts and ideations and self-harm. Up until before the shooting, I don't think the school received any genuine threats of being shut up, or I don't think the school received anything like that.
Okay. So, now after the shooting, what do you believe are the main reasons behind this event? Specifically within the individuals, was it childhood abuse, neglect from the families, substance abuse within the families, bullying, etc.?
Are we talking about?
After the shooting, about Alec McKinney and Devin Erickson.
There's not much I can say on Devin Erickson, but as for Alec McKinney, he had a rough go of childhood. First time he ever did cocaine, it was out of his mother's purse. There was a lot going on for him. He wasn't okay, and he wasn't okay for a long time. I used to drive him to therapy every now and then after school, but he wouldn't want to go. When I would drive Alec and his aunt up to class in the mornings, a lot of times he wasn't able to get out of bed. I know he was taking meds for depression, anxiety, and schizophrenia. I know that he would skip a couple of days of his meds so he can take a whole bunch of them all at once to get high.
Okay.
And when it comes to self-harm, I've never seen anyone self-harm like Alec McKinney.
Okay. Do you believe that the, quote, political climate of the school had enforced any motives within the school shooting? Political climate relating specifically to anti-LGBT rhetoric, anti-communist rhetoric, etc. If so, what's your position on this matter? Do you believe there's enough research or study to suggest that transition is particularly possible, especially among an individual such as McKinney, who, as you clarified, was diagnosed with schizophrenia, did have these issues? Was it the right choice for them to make?
I supported Alec when he was going through that, and he was transitioning. I knew Alec when Alec was still Maya. I know that Alec was doing a lot better as Alec up until he did drugs and cocaine, and he got involved with the people who would give this to him, who would do it with him. He had a hard time at his first high school, which was also Douglas County. I know that the politics on LGBTQ were not the same as they are today. And as for the way that the school would respond to that in terms of LGBTQ rhetoric or bullying, I know that Alec had approached me a couple of times because he had a class where there were a couple of people who refused to call him Alec and refused to call him a man. or a boy. And that would really upset him. He would come and sit with me because it was my off period, and I would talk to him about that for a while. There was one day I even just walked into the classroom, picked up his backpack, and walked out because I wasn't letting him go back to that class. In terms of that, and in terms of Alec, that is the only time at STEM I had ever heard or witnessed bullying of any kind. In terms of the LGBTQ community that was there.
Okay. Do you believe there were, given those considerations, any notable warning signs prior to the event of the shooting?
I don't think anyone knew what was coming.
Okay.
I mean, the kids that were bullying Alec weren't even on the hit list.
All right.
The school should have responded to it better, though. Because I would walk, like I said, I would walk people up. Alec was one of the kids I used to walk up to the school counselor when shit like that would happen. And they were breaking down and they needed an adult to intervene. They didn't intervene. They didn't stop that group of kids from harassing him.
Okay. All right. Last question. How has this particular event impacted your life?
A lot of the time I feel stuck. There were a lot of other things going on for me around that time too, so I feel stuck in more than one way, but a lot of the time I feel stuck. Like if the shooting didn't happen, where would I be? If the shooting didn't happen, my mental state probably would have been a lot better around that time. If that didn't happen, I'd probably have more relationships with the people who were at STEM, who I got along with. There would have been so much less hate. There would have been less isolation, there would have been less loneliness, there would have been a hell of a lot less.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. I'll just remind you again real quick, but if you wish for this original audio recording to be removed from the internet at any point, just please email me. I can take it down from the source I provide it to. I can't promise duplicates, copies, etc. won't be made.